The chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken. This quote from Samuel Johnson has haunted those who study the human mind, not because it is poetic, but because it speaks a quiet truth about how people lose themselves long before they notice. At first, the choices feel deliberate, a message you answer out of kindness, a glance you return because it feels harmless, a compliment you replay in your mind, convincing yourself it is nothing. Yet slowly, layer by layer, the weight grows until you realize something else is pulling the strings. You tell yourself you are free, yet your reactions prove otherwise. The more you believe you are immune, the tighter the invisible grip becomes. It begins quietly, a surge of pleasure that does not feel dangerous, only natural. What many never realize is that the brain's reward system is ancient and predictable. At the center of this design lies dopamine, a chemical not of pleasure itself, but of craving, anticipation, and pursuit. Every desire, every rush toward reward, every restless thought when the reward is delayed can be traced to its call. It whispers of possibility, promising that something just out of reach will complete you. The rush fades quickly, but the pursuit does not. And this is where dark psychology enters, not as magic or mysticism, but as precise understanding of the human reward system and how easily it can be exploited. You may imagine manipulation as overt control, obvious commands shouted by an aggressor. In truth, real manipulation is quiet, elegant, and patient. It thrives on small hooks rather than open chains. A manipulator does not force you. They shape your desires so that you willingly walk into the trap. This is not about overpowering your will. It is about rewriting it so you believe the choice is yours. The most dangerous cage is the one you defend because you think you built it. Consider how subtle this can be. A partner gives you sudden affection, then withdraws it without warning. Your brain, confused and restless, craves its return. Social media showers you with unpredictable likes, comments, or notifications. Each ding feels like possibility, a small burst of hope. Political figures or marketing campaigns promise solutions, only to move the goalpost and demand more. In each of these, dopamine is not rewarding the pleasure itself, it is fueling the search, making you restless for resolution, desperate for the next moment of relief. Dark psychology studies these mechanics, not to cure them, but to wield them in abusive relationships, in cults, in online manipulation. The same principle repeats: control the timing and frequency of rewards, and you control behavior. It does not matter how strong or intelligent a person believes they are. No one is exempt from the cycle of anticipation and relief when it is finely tuned. That is why manipulation thrives even in the age of information. Knowledge does not equal immunity when the very chemicals of desire work against you. You might wonder why this matters. You believe you know when someone is playing with your emotions. You think you could spot a manipulator the moment they appear, yet the truth is more uncomfortable. By the time you realize the pattern, you have already been conditioned. The hook is not the action itself, but the craving it leaves behind, the moments of withdrawal or the silent treatment, the subtle praise. These are calculated to create dependence, and while you may see yourself as rational, the chemical chase inside you is anything but. This understanding opens a darker question. If dopamine is this predictable, how many of your daily decisions are truly yours? When you chase success, validation, or love, are you choosing freely, or are you following an ancient script that anyone with knowledge of dark psychology can exploit? In the quiet moments, when you are alone with your thoughts, how much of what you want has been planted there by someone else, waiting for you to act without questioning why? The answer is not as comforting as you might hope, and the deeper truth is still ahead, hidden within the illusion of control you have always trusted. For as long as people can remember, society has repeated the idea that every individual has complete control over their own mind. From childhood, we are told that willpower is enough to overcome any challenge. that rational thinking shields us from influence, and that our choices are entirely ours. This belief comforts people because it creates a sense of security and pride. It suggests that if something goes wrong in life, the only person responsible is the self. In reality, this idea is flawed. Control is never absolute, and most of the time it is not even close to what people imagine. At the center of this misconception lies a chemical process in the brain that works quietly in the background. Dopamine is often referred to as a pleasure chemical, yet that definition is inaccurate. Dopamine does not give pleasure. It motivates us to seek pleasure, to chase rewards, and to continue acting until the brain believes the goal has been achieved. This is an important distinction. Pleasure ends quickly, but the pursuit continues. The cycle that begins with a simple craving can become a loop that shapes daily behavior without conscious awareness. People think they are choosing to pursue what they want, when in reality they are responding to signals their brain sends long before they analyze the situation. Manipulation takes advantage of this misunderstanding. When someone knows how dopamine operates, they can design situations where you keep chasing something that feels urgent, even when it is unnecessary or harmful. The manipulator does not need to threaten you. They only need to provide rewards in calculated patterns that keep your brain engaged. This is why marketing campaigns, toxic relationships, and even political movements often succeed. They do not win because their logic is strong. They win because they know how to make people crave resolution, attention, or approval. The cycle is simple but powerful. A reward is given, sometimes withheld, and then reintroduced in unpredictable ways. This unpredictability triggers higher dopamine activity than consistent rewards ever could. The result is anticipation that grows stronger with every uncertainty. The victim feels compelled to act, not because of reasoned choice, but because the craving becomes unbearable. This is not weakness. This is biology. The same mechanism that once helped our ancestors survive now exposes us to subtle forms of psychological control in modern life. Dark psychology studies these patterns with precision. It examines how people can be guided without force, how craving can override logic, and how belief in personal control can be used to keep someone trapped. This is not only present in personal relationships, it can be found in advertising strategies, social media algorithms, and environments built to keep people hooked for as long as possible. The danger is not always visible, which makes it far more effective. By the time someone questions what is happening, their brain has already adapted to the pattern. The belief that we are entirely free in our decisions is therefore a comforting illusion. It feels empowering, but it leaves people vulnerable to those who understand the truth. The more someone insists they cannot be manipulated, the easier it becomes to manipulate them. This paradox explains why intelligent and experienced individuals are not immune to cycles of control. The moment they believe they are untouchable, they stop questioning the signals driving their behavior. What this reveals is unsettling. The human mind is shaped as much by chemistry as by conscious thought. Those who understand this can quietly influence decisions without ever appearing to take control. Dopamine is one of the most studied neurotransmitters in neuroscience, yet it is also one of the most misunderstood. Many people assume that dopamine is the substance responsible for pleasure, happiness, or enjoyment. In truth, dopamine is better understood as the chemical of anticipation and motivation. It is the signal that drives you to pursue something, rather than the reward you feel when you finally achieve it. This difference is critical, because craving and pleasure are not the same. A person can experience high dopamine levels during pursuit, while feeling little to no satisfaction upon completion. This is why so many individuals find themselves stuck in cycles of seeking, never fully content even when they get what they believed they wanted. The human brain evolved this system for survival. Dopamine encourages exploration, food seeking, social bonding, and reproduction. Without it, humans would lack the drive to act. However, this same mechanism can become a weakness in modern environments, designed to exploit it. Unlike the unpredictable challenges of early life, modern systems are engineered to trigger dopamine intentionally. Social media notifications, unpredictable sales promotions, online gaming rewards, and even relationship patterns exploit this exact mechanism. Every unpredictable ping, every uncertain outcome, every rare victory activates the same pathways that once helped our ancestors hunt for food or escape predators. The most powerful feature of dopamine is its response to unpredictability. Studies in behavioral psychology have shown that the human brain releases more dopamine when rewards are intermittent rather than consistent. When you cannot predict whether a reward will come, your brain anticipates it more strongly, creating heightened motivation to continue seeking. This is why gambling becomes addictive even when people know the odds are against them. It is also why toxic relationships can become psychologically binding, as periods of affection are followed by periods of withdrawal. The uncertainty itself fuels the craving. Dark psychology leverages this principle by constructing environments where unpredictability is constant. Manipulators do not need to reward every action. They only need to reward occasionally, ensuring that anticipation remains high. This principle, known as intermittent reinforcement, is among the most effective techniques for conditioning behavior. Laboratory experiments with animals have demonstrated that subjects exposed to unpredictable rewards press levers more persistently than those who receive predictable rewards. The same principle applies to human behavior, whether in consumer marketing, romantic entanglements, or social influence campaigns. When dopamine pathways are repeatedly activated, they create strong memory traces. These traces form habits and routines that are difficult to break. Even when a person consciously decides to stop, the craving becomes automatic, emerging in the background whenever a familiar cue appears. Over time, this can lead to compulsive behavior that feels voluntary but is actually conditioned. This is why people continue to check their phones even when they are not expecting a message, or why they stay in harmful dynamics long after recognizing the harm. Manipulation thrives in this environment because it does not require force or overt persuasion. It simply requires knowledge of timing and triggers. By presenting cues at carefully chosen moments, manipulators can guide behavior while allowing the victim to feel autonomous. This is what makes dark psychology so insidious. The victim believes they are acting freely, while every step has been subtly encouraged by predictable patterns in their brain chemistry. Understanding dopamine in this way removes the false comfort that awareness alone prevents manipulation. Knowing that craving can override reason explains why cycles of control are so effective. It also highlights a disturbing reality about human behavior. People are not simply rational beings making free choices. They are biological organisms responding to chemical signals that can be predicted, manipulated, and exploited by anyone who understands the system well enough. Manipulation begins at a point so subtle that most people never realize it has started. It does not begin with control or force. It begins with attention, curiosity, and the brain's response to reward. The first step is almost always a positive experience. A kind gesture, a compliment, or a small reward draws the person closer. At this stage, there is no suspicion because the interaction feels good. Dopamine is quietly released, signaling the brain to seek more of that feeling. This is the hook. Once the hook is set, the manipulator no longer needs to push. They only need to maintain an environment where the anticipation of reward never fully disappears. The process often uses what behavioral psychology calls intermittent reinforcement. Instead of giving consistent rewards, the manipulator varies their timing and intensity. Sometimes they give praise, sometimes they remain silent, sometimes they withdraw entirely. The unpredictability of these responses amplifies dopamine release, which in turn strengthens the desire to regain the reward. The victim feels compelled to act, not because the manipulator commands them, but because their brain begins chasing the next moment of relief. This principle is observed not only in abusive relationships, but also in environments such as gambling machines, social media algorithms, and sales strategies designed to keep consumers engaged indefinitely. What makes this process dangerous is how quickly it bypasses rational thought. A person might tell themselves they are in control, yet their behavior starts to shift to align with the manipulator's cues. They wait for messages, analyze subtle changes in tone, or alter their actions in hope of regaining approval. Over time, their focus narrows. The manipulator becomes the center of their mental world. This is not a conscious decision. It is a gradual conditioning, built on the craving cycle that dopamine creates. Dark psychology uses this mechanism to establish power without appearing aggressive. The manipulator creates a pattern that feels rewarding, just often enough to keep the victim invested. Even when the victim notices inconsistencies, they rationalize them as misunderstandings or their own fault. This internal conflict strengthens the cycle further, because guilt and confusion create vulnerability to the next wave of reward. Each time the reward returns, relief floods the system, reinforcing the bond and deepening dependence. Research into trauma bonding demonstrates how powerful this cycle can become. Studies show that when positive and negative experiences alternate unpredictably, emotional attachment grows stronger, rather than weaker. The human brain associates relief from pain with affection for the very person causing it. This paradox explains why people often remain in relationships or groups that harm them. Leaving would mean giving up the moments of relief they have been conditioned to crave, and the anticipation of those moments is stronger than the memory of harm. Modern environments expand this principle beyond personal relationships. Social platforms, entertainment industries, and marketing strategies deliberately incorporate unpredictability to keep users returning. Every notification, every unpredictable reward, every carefully timed scarcity message triggers the same neurological response. This is not accidental design. It is deliberate exploitation of well-documented psychological principles. The starting point of manipulation is therefore never loud or obvious. It is quiet, calculated, and built on the most reliable aspects of human biology. By the time the victim recognizes the pattern, their brain has already adapted to expect it. Once the initial hooks are set, manipulation rarely remains a single moment. It becomes a repeating cycle that strengthens each time it loops. The pattern begins with a lure, where attention or reward is introduced to establish interest. It then transitions into a hook, where the reward feels attainable, yet slightly withheld, creating heightened anticipation. The next phase is reward, where the victim experiences relief and satisfaction. Afterward, the manipulator withdraws, either through silence, criticism, or deliberate absence. Finally, the cycle restarts with another lure. Each rotation strengthens the emotional attachment and deepens the craving, making escape progressively harder. Dopamine plays a central role in this repetition. The brain does not only respond to the reward itself, it responds more strongly to the anticipation of the reward, especially when the timing is uncertain. This means that inconsistent behavior from the manipulator does not weaken attachment, it strengthens it. Victims find themselves waiting, watching, and analyzing every detail for signs of the next reward. Even negative interactions can intensify the craving, because relief from negativity is processed by the brain in the same way as a positive outcome. The mind begins to chase resolution rather than peace. Dark psychology recognizes this cycle and uses it to maintain control without constant effort. A skilled manipulator knows that rewards lose power when they are predictable. They deliberately alternate between warmth and coldness, approval and rejection, attention and neglect. This keeps the victim uncertain, yet hopeful, ensuring constant engagement. The victim often does not realize they are being conditioned. They mistake the relief of receiving a reward for love, respect, or validation. In reality, they are responding to carefully engineered signals that keep them dependent. Trauma bonding research explains why breaking this cycle is so difficult. When intermittent reward and punishment occur, the victim's stress response becomes intertwined with moments of relief. The resulting attachment is stronger than bonds formed through consistent kindness. Victims may describe this experience as addictive, and that description is accurate. The same neurological pathways activated by gambling and substance addiction are present in this form of psychological control. Over time, the victim learns to associate the manipulator with both pain and relief, which creates a powerful loop of dependence. The same neurological pathways, activated by gambling and substance addiction, are present in this form of psychological control. Over time, the victim learns to associate the manipulator with both pain and relief, which creates a powerful loop of dependence. The cycle does not always occur in personal relationships. It appears in broader environments, such as workplaces, online communities, and even national politics. Marketing campaigns rely on anticipation, followed by scarcity, encouraging consumers to act quickly. Social platforms intentionally create variable notification schedules to keep users checking constantly. Political figures alternate between fear and reassurance, maintaining attention and loyalty. These are not accidents of design. They are calculated uses of psychological principles that have been proven to work across cultures and age groups. What makes this cycle particularly dangerous is that each loop reinforces the next. The longer a person remains inside it, the harder it becomes to recognize manipulation, and the harder it becomes to detach even when recognition occurs. The brain becomes conditioned to crave the reward regardless of the cost. The person may rationalize harmful behavior, dismiss red flags, or believe that leaving would create unbearable emptiness. This is not a sign of weakness. It is the predictable outcome of a biological system exploited by someone who understands how to control it. Free will is often regarded as the cornerstone of human dignity. People grow up believing that they alone choose their paths, that decisions are guided by logic and morality rather than unconscious forces. This belief is comforting. It reassures us that mistakes are ours to correct and triumphs are ours to celebrate. Yet research in cognitive psychology repeatedly challenges this notion. Evidence shows that many decisions occur in the brain milliseconds before conscious awareness. By the time you believe you are making a choice, neural pathways have already prepared the action. Dopamine is central to this process. It does not simply motivate behavior. It creates predictions and drives the search for outcomes that match those predictions. When dopamine surges, you feel compelled towards something, often without questioning why. Manipulation exploits this by feeding cues and triggers into the system, guiding your behavior while allowing you to believe you are acting freely. This is why marketing campaigns, abusive partners, and political narratives can influence even the most skeptical individuals. The brain interprets signals of reward and threat before conscious reasoning can intervene. Dark psychology leverages this understanding in subtle ways. Rather than overtly commanding behavior, it shapes the environment so the desired action feels voluntary. A manipulator provides carefully timed rewards or creates moments of discomfort that only they can resolve. The victim begins to associate relief and satisfaction with the manipulator's approval, mistaking conditioned responses for personal choice. Over time, this creates an illusion of agency. You may feel that you are deciding to stay, to engage, or to obey when in fact your dopamine-driven cravings are deciding for you. Studies in choice blindness demonstrate how easily free will can be distorted. In experiments, participants were shown 2 images and asked to choose one. Moments later, researchers swapped the images and presented the unchosen one as if it were the participant's choice. Most participants failed to notice the swap and even defended the reasons behind the choice they never actually made. This illustrates how the mind reconstructs narratives to maintain the appearance of control, even when control is absent. The same principle applies to manipulation. Victims explain their actions in ways that preserve the illusion of free will, unaware of the subtle cues that influence them. The philosophical implications are unsettling. If dopamine drives behavior, and manipulators know how to control dopamine, can free will ever be absolute? The concept of autonomy weakens under this lens. People are not blank slates, making purely rational choices. They are biological systems responding to chemical signals that can be anticipated and directed. The moral questions this raises are profound. Can someone be fully responsible for actions shaped by forces they cannot perceive? Can society hold individuals accountable when their decisions are subtly engineered? What emerges is a picture of human behavior that is far more fragile than people wish to admit. The belief in total independence is not only inaccurate, it leaves individuals vulnerable to exploitation because they underestimate the power of psychological control. Manipulation does not remain limited to individuals. When understood deeply, it can be scaled into entire systems that govern society. What begins as personal influence becomes institutionalized control, reinforced by technology, media, and cultural structures that most people accept without resistance. This shift is not always visible. It often hides in daily routines, in the platforms people trust, and in the narratives repeated until they feel like common sense. The power of dark psychology grows exponentially when it stops being personal and becomes systemic.
Dopamine remains the core mechanism.
The same reward pathways that motivate individuals to pursue approval or affection can be engineered on a massive scale. Social media platforms exploit this by delivering unpredictable notifications, likes, and content designed to capture attention. Political campaigns use cycles of fear and relief to maintain loyalty. Marketing strategies create artificial scarcity and anticipation to keep consumers hooked. Each of these uses the same principle of intermittent reinforcement, but now applied to millions at once. This is not random design. It is calculated manipulation at the scale of entire populations. Systemic manipulation thrives because it aligns with profit and power. Corporations benefit when people remain addicted to products or platforms. Political figures benefit when citizens remain emotionally invested in narratives of threat or salvation. The line between persuasion and control blurs, yet most people remain unaware of the shift. They believe their preferences are personal, when those preferences were shaped long before conscious thought began. The manipulation is effective precisely because it feels invisible. Dark psychology research highlights how environmental design can override individual resistance. People believe they are immune to influence, yet they consistently underestimate the power of structured rewards and punishments. When an entire environment is built to exploit dopamine responses, escaping the influence requires more than awareness. It demands deliberate effort to step outside the system, which is difficult when the system encompasses nearly every aspect of daily life. Workplaces, entertainment, and even news cycles operate on similar psychological principles. This scale of manipulation raises ethical concerns. At what point does influence become exploitation? When every moment of attention is monetized and every craving is engineered, how much freedom remains? Philosophers have debated free will for centuries, but the combination of neuroscience and technology introduces a new urgency. This is not just theory, it is measurable, repeatable, and already shaping human behavior in profound ways. Individuals adapt to the system, rather than the system adapting to individuals, creating cycles of dependence that are harder to escape with each passing year. The most alarming feature of systemic manipulation is its self-reinforcing nature. As more people respond to the cues, algorithms learn to optimize them. The result is an environment that grows more persuasive over time. What begins as mild engagement evolves into compulsion. What feels like personal choice is, in reality, the outcome of constant psychological conditioning applied at scale. Breaking free from manipulation begins with understanding the structure of the cycle itself. Awareness is the first step, but it is not enough to create freedom. The same dopamine-driven patterns that kept someone hooked will continue to fire even after they learn about them. This is why people can recognize harmful behavior, promise to stop engaging, and still return to it later. The craving does not vanish with knowledge. It only diminishes through deliberate action, patience, and consistent resistance to triggers. The brain's reward system is designed to seek what feels urgent rather than what is healthy. Manipulation takes advantage of this by creating situations that feel emotionally intense, making detachment seem impossible. To counter this, the cycle must be interrupted where it is strongest, during moments of anticipation. By observing cravings without immediately acting on them, you begin retraining the brain to tolerate discomfort instead of constantly chasing relief. Psychological studies on delayed gratification show that individuals who learn to endure the gap between craving and reward gain stronger self-control over time. Dark psychology loses power when patterns are recognized early. One practical method is to track emotional highs and lows linked to interactions or environments. If you notice that praise or attention alternates with withdrawal in unpredictable ways, you are likely caught in an intermittent reinforcement loop. Identifying this pattern allows you to anticipate manipulative cycles rather than respond automatically to them. Over time, the recognition itself creates space for choice. Detachment also requires changing the environment that fuels the craving. Constant exposure to triggers, whether a toxic individual, a manipulative community, or a digital platform engineered for engagement, reinforces the loop. Reducing or removing exposure gives the brain time to recalibrate. This is not instant. Dopamine pathways that formed over weeks or months take time to weaken. Temporary discomfort during this period is expected and should not be mistaken for failure. The absence of immediate relief is a sign that the reward cycle is being disrupted. Another critical element is rebuilding autonomy. When manipulation erodes free will, individuals often lose trust in their own judgment. Reclaiming agency involves making small, deliberate choices and observing their outcomes. This process restores confidence in personal decision-making. Support systems, whether therapy, trusted relationships, or structured routines, help reinforce new behaviors until they become habits stronger than the old cravings. Breaking manipulation is not a single event, but an ongoing process. It requires constant awareness, consistent boundaries, and a willingness to face discomfort without rushing to escape it. The deeper truth is that freedom is not found in avoiding craving, but in learning to navigate it. Those who master this skill become far less susceptible to future control. The cycle can be broken, but it demands more than knowledge. It demands active resistance, steady patience, and the courage to confront what the mind has been conditioned to seek. Throughout human history, people have believed that understanding the forces shaping behavior would lead to freedom. It seems logical to assume that knowledge should protect us from being controlled. However, knowledge does not silence craving. It does not erase the dopamine pathways already formed by repeated reinforcement. Even when we recognize manipulation, the anticipation of reward continues to echo in the brain. This is why individuals often return to harmful patterns. Even after seeing them clearly, awareness creates insight, but it does not always create escape. The reality is more unsettling. Dark psychology does not operate in secret corners of society. It is embedded into daily routines, hidden in the structure of relationships, and amplified through technology. Marketing campaigns deliberately alternate between fear and relief to maintain attention. Social media platforms engineer unpredictable rewards to prolong engagement. Abusive relationships oscillate between affection and neglect to create emotional dependence. These are not isolated cases. They are symptoms of a broader system built to exploit predictable human responses. Dopamine is at the center of this system. It motivates the chase rather than the satisfaction. Every notification, every glance, every word of approval feeds the cycle of craving. This does not make human beings weak. It makes them human. The same mechanism that once ensured survival in an uncertain world now exposes people to control in environments designed for constant stimulation. The more the system evolves, the more refined the manipulation becomes, and the harder it is to recognize the extent of its influence. Breaking free from this cycle is possible, but not absolute. It requires conscious effort to observe rather than react, to delay gratification rather than chase immediate relief. It demands environments that support autonomy rather than exploit craving. Yet even with these tools, freedom is fragile. A single trigger can reactivate conditioned pathways and pull someone back into the loop. This fragility is why manipulators remain powerful and why entire industries thrive on maintaining human dependence. The question that remains is not whether manipulation can be eliminated. It cannot. The question is how much awareness can change the way people respond to it. Can individuals learn to recognize patterns quickly enough to resist them? Can society create systems that value autonomy over control? These are questions with no simple answers. What is certain is that the cycle of manipulation will continue as long as reward and anticipation govern human behavior. If this exploration has deepened your understanding, share it with those who question why they repeat the same patterns. Invite them to see the forces that shape their choices. Engage with this channel for future insights into the unseen dynamics of human behavior and dark psychology. The next truths we uncover will challenge assumptions even more deeply, and those willing to confront them will never see their own decisions the same way again.